American independence didn't come easily. It emerged from a turbulent period where a group of colonies dared to challenge one of the world's most powerful empires. Against the backdrop of oppressive taxes and unyielding laws, these colonies were pushed to the brink. The struggle for freedom was not merely about throwing off the chains of tyranny. It was about crafting a new identity and a bold vision for a nation. As the flames of rebellion ignited, the path to independence became a gripping saga of perseverance, strategy, and sacrifice. How did these early Americans turn their vision of freedom into reality? Prepare to dive deep into the extraordinary story of how the United States claimed its independence and began its journey toward becoming a sovereign nation. The seeds of American independence began to sprout in the wake of the French and Indian War from 1754 to 1763, a conflict that left Britain with an enormous debt. To alleviate the financial burden, the British government imposed a series of taxes and regulatory measures on the American colonies, fueling growing resentment and unrest. One of the most contentious of these measures was the Stamp Act of 1765. This legislation mandated that all legal documents, newspapers, playing cards, and various other printed materials be produced on paper stamped with an official seal, purchased directly from British authorities. This was a direct attempt to raise revenue from the colonies without their consent, a move that the colonists saw as a grave violation of their rights as English subjects. The Stamp Act was met with immediate and widespread resistance. Colonists formed the Stamp Act Congress, which united representatives from several colonies to draft a formal protest. They organized boycotts of British goods, and local groups such as the Sons of Liberty engaged in acts of civil disobedience, including the intimidation and harassment of tax collectors. The intensity of the backlash led to the eventual repeal of the Stamp Act in 1766, but the tensions had only begun to escalate. The British government, undeterred, enacted the Townshend Acts of 1767, which imposed duties on essential items such as tea, glass, lead, and paper. These acts were intended not only to raise revenue, but also to assert British authority over the colonies. The imposition of these duties was seen as another form of taxation without representation. In response, the colonies organized widespread boycotts and adopted non-importation agreements to undermine British economic interests. The unrest reached a boiling point with the Boston Massacre of 1770, when British soldiers, amidst rising tensions and provocation, opened fire on a crowd of colonists, killing 5 and wounding several others. This incident was a pivotal moment, widely publicized and used by colonial leaders to galvanize anti-British sentiment. The British response included the partial repeal of the Townshend duties, except for the tax on tea, which was retained as a symbol of British authority. This act of defiance against colonial grievances only intensified the conflict, laying the groundwork for further revolutionary activities. The growing sense of injustice and desire for self-determination among the colonies continued to build, setting the stage for the eventual push towards independence. The combination of unfair taxation, lack of representation, and aggressive British policies had deeply alienated the colonists, fueling a revolutionary spirit that would ultimately culminate in the struggle for American independence. As the simmering tensions between the American colonies and Britain reached a critical juncture, key events vividly illustrated the escalating conflict and the colonies' burgeoning resolve for independence. The Boston Massacre of 1770 stands out as a stark manifestation of this rising discord. On a frigid March evening, a confrontation between British soldiers and a crowd of angry colonists in Boston's icy streets escalated dramatically. Amid snowball throws and verbal taunts, the soldiers, already on edge due to the heavy military presence and hostile environment, fired into the crowd without clear orders, killing 5 men, including Crispus Attucks, a mixed-race sailor and the first martyr of the American Revolution. The incident quickly became a potent symbol of British tyranny, as colonial leaders like Samuel Adams and Paul Revere seized on the tragedy to galvanize public opinion. Propaganda materials, including Paul Revere's iconic engraving of the massacre, exaggerated the violence and depicted British soldiers as brutal aggressors, fueling anti-British sentiment across the colonies and laying the groundwork for a united revolutionary movement. Following this, the Boston Tea Party of 1773 marked a defining moment in colonial resistance. The Tea Act, passed by the British Parliament in 1773, was designed to support the financially struggling British East India Company by allowing it to sell surplus tea directly to the colonies, bypassing colonial merchants and effectively undercutting local business. Colonists viewed this as a blatant attempt to impose a tax through corporate monopoly, despite having no representation in Parliament. In protest, on December 16, a group of patriots disguised as Mohawk Indians boarded 3 British ships docked in Boston Harbor under the cover of night. They proceeded to dump 342 chests of tea, worth millions in today's currency, into the harbor. This dramatic act of rebellion was not merely a protest but a direct challenge to British authority and economic policy, demonstrating the colonies' determination to resist what they saw as oppressive legislation. In response to the Boston Tea Party, the British government enacted the Coercive Acts of 1774, known in America as the Intolerable Acts. These punitive measures were designed to quell the growing unrest and reassert British control. The Boston Port Act closed the city's harbor until the destroyed tea was paid for, effectively strangling Boston's economy. The Massachusetts Government Act curtailed the power of local assemblies and allowed British officials accused of crimes to be tried in Britain or other colonies, further angering the colonists who felt this undermined their judicial autonomy. Additionally, the Quartering Act was expanded to allow British troops to be housed in private homes, aggravating colonial resentment. These measures were intended to isolate Boston and punish it for its defiance, but instead galvanized colonial resistance, leading to the convening of the First Continental Congress in September 1774. The Congress, representing a unified front of the colonies, responded by organizing a boycott of British goods and preparing for possible military conflict. The escalating tensions and increasingly punitive British responses set the stage for the armed conflict that would become the American Revolutionary War, as the colonies' quest for independence became increasingly intertwined with their struggle for self-governance and resistance against perceived tyranny. The path to American independence was significantly shaped by the First Continental Congress, which met in Philadelphia in September 1774 as a direct response to the harsh Intolerable Acts imposed by Britain. These acts, specifically designed to punish Massachusetts for the Boston Tea Party, severely restricted colonial autonomy and angered the colonies, uniting them in their opposition. The First Continental Congress, comprising delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies, was a landmark moment in colonial unity, as it marked the first concerted effort to address grievances against British rule on a collective basis. The Congress's major resolutions included a comprehensive boycott of British goods, aimed at exerting economic pressure on Britain, and the drafting of a formal petition to King George III that pleaded for a redress of grievances while still professing loyalty to the crown. This petition, however, was dismissed by the king, who perceived the colony's actions as a threat to British authority, thus escalating tensions. As conflict broke out with the battles of Lexington and Concord in April 1775, the Second Continental Congress convened in May 1775, evolving into the de facto government of the colonies amid growing revolutionary fervor. This Congress was tasked with extraordinary responsibilities, such as organizing the Continental Army, appointing George Washington as its commander-in-chief, and securing foreign alliances. In June 1776, the Congress faced a critical turning point with increasing pressure to formalize the colony's separation from Britain. The task of drafting a Declaration of Independence was assigned to a committee led by Thomas Jefferson. Alongside key figures like John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson's draft, imbued with Enlightenment principles and inspired by prior colonial grievances, eloquently articulated the colonies' inherent rights to self-governance and freedom, famously asserting that all men are created equal and possess unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress formally adopted the Declaration of Independence, a monumental act that declared the colonies free from British rule. The Declaration meticulously outlined the colonies' grievances against King George III, detailing how his reign had consistently violated their rights and undermined their freedoms. It was not only a powerful statement of ideological principles, but also a strategic move to rally support both domestically and internationally, laying the groundwork for the American Revolutionary War and the eventual establishment of a new nation. The Declaration of Independence in July 1776 marked the commencement of the American Revolutionary War, a protracted struggle for autonomy that lasted until 1783. Initially, the Continental Army faced considerable adversity. The Battle of Long Island, fought in August 1776, was a disastrous engagement for the Americans. Despite their efforts, General George Washington's troops were decisively defeated by the British forces led by General William Howe, leading to a forced retreat across the East River. This defeat, coupled with subsequent losses, severely tested American resolve. The harsh winter encampment at Valley Forge from December 1777 to June 1778 was particularly dire. The Continental Army, with dwindling supplies and inadequate clothing, suffered from extreme cold, hunger, and disease, leading to significant casualties. The leadership of General Washington, however, proved crucial. His perseverance, coupled with the organizational expertise of Baron von Steuben, who introduced rigorous training and discipline, transformed the demoralized and poorly equipped soldiers into a more effective fighting force. A turning point in the conflict came with the American victory at the Battle of Saratoga in October 1777. This crucial win, where General Horatio Gates's forces decisively defeated British General John Burgoyne's army, was instrumental in persuading France to enter the war as an ally. The French provided vital military support, including troops, naval power, and supplies, which significantly strengthened the American position. The culmination of the war occurred with the Siege of Yorktown in 1781. General Washington, in coordination with French forces commanded by General Rochambeau, laid siege to the British forces led by General Cornwallis. The prolonged and strategic siege, marked by coordinated land and naval blockades, forced Cornwallis into a vulnerable position. The British surrender on October 19, 1781, effectively ended major military operations in the war. This decisive victory led to the eventual signing of the Treaty of Paris in September 1783, where Britain formally recognized American independence, concluding the conflict and affirming the United States' sovereignty. Throughout the war, despite early setbacks and enduring hardships, the tenacity, strategic prowess, and alliance-building efforts of the American forces were pivotal in securing independence from British rule. The path to peace following the Revolutionary War was characterized by a series of crucial agreements and significant challenges that shaped the nascent United States. The Treaty of Paris, signed on September 3, 1783, marked the official end of the Revolutionary War and was a monumental achievement for the American colonies. This treaty not only secured British recognition of American independence, but also granted the United States an expansive territory that included lands from the Mississippi River to the Appalachian Mountains, and from the Great Lakes to Florida. This territorial acquisition promised to lay the foundation for westward expansion, although the treaty's implementation faced complications, such as the slow withdrawal of British troops from American soil and disputes over the treatment of loyalists who had supported the British during the war. Furthermore, the treaty's provisions regarding fishing rights and debt repayments added to the complexities of the post-war period. In the aftermath of achieving independence, the newly formed United States confronted the formidable task of establishing a functional and enduring government. The Articles of Confederation, which had been adopted in 1781 as the country's first constitution, created a confederation of sovereign states with a deliberately weak central government. This arrangement aimed to preserve state autonomy but resulted in numerous inefficiencies, including the inability to levy taxes, regulate interstate commerce, or maintain a standing army. The lack of a strong central authority led to economic instability, interstate quarrels, and difficulty in addressing internal and external threats. The inadequacies of the Articles became increasingly apparent, prompting calls for reform. In response to these challenges, the Constitutional Convention convened in Philadelphia in 1787. This gathering of delegates, initially tasked with revising the Articles of Confederation, soon took on the broader mission of crafting a new constitution. The result was the U.S. Constitution, a document that established a more robust federal framework with a balanced separation of powers among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The Constitution introduced a system of checks and balances designed to prevent any single branch from gaining excessive power, and included provisions for a stronger federal authority capable of regulating commerce, raising revenues, and providing for national defense. Additionally, the Constitution incorporated the principle of federalism, which delineated the powers and responsibilities of the national and state governments, fostering a more cohesive yet flexible governance structure. The ratification of the Constitution was a rigorous process that involved extensive debate and compromise among the states. The Federalist Papers, authored by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, played a crucial role in advocating for the new framework and addressing concerns about the potential for centralized tyranny. The ratification process culminated in 1789 with the Bill of Rights, comprising the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, being added to safeguard individual liberties and address the concerns of anti-federalists who feared the erosion of personal freedoms. Thus, the transition from the Treaty of Paris to the ratification of the Constitution represented a critical period of transformation, as the United States evolved from a collection of disparate states into a unified and self-governing republic, setting the stage for its future growth and development. The struggle for American independence was a monumental endeavor, defined by extraordinary sacrifice and resolute triumph. It began with early protests against British policies that ignited a fire of resistance and evolved into a full-scale conflict marked by intense battles and profound hardship. The colony's journey from initial grievances, through pivotal moments of defiance like the Boston Tea Party, to the ultimate declaration of independence and military victory, showcased a relentless pursuit of freedom. Each step, from the early defeats and harsh winters of the Revolutionary War to key victories like Saratoga and the final surrender at Yorktown, highlighted the indomitable spirit and collective resolve of the American people. The subsequent creation of a new government, despite the initial struggles under the Articles of Confederation, laid the foundation for a stable and enduring democracy. This narrative of struggle, resilience, and ultimate success stands as a powerful testament to the determination of a nation to forge its own destiny. Thank you for joining us on this historical journey. If you enjoyed this exploration of America's path to independence, please like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth historical content. Until next time, continue delving into the past to gain insight into the present and shape the future.